then twist my arm, an introduction to body mapping. Please welcome Alison Aslett.
Very bright lights. Welcome everybody and thank you for coming along this afternoon. I'm Alison Wells, I'm a cellist and I now work at the Royal Conservatoire of Scotland.
I'm Austis Valkenstock. I come from Iceland, but I teach at the Royal Conservatoire in The Hague and I play the viola.
And we couldn't have had a more perfect starting presentation to follow for this body mapping talk, everything that Joanne said. Hopefully we're going to now be able to take apart a little bit in anatomical terms, so which will help you maybe understand a few things. One of the reasons we're so passionate about this though is because I think both of us have experienced in our own playing, and certainly a lot of colleagues, the amount of injury that is out there in the profession. And certainly when I graduated, you didn't talk about it. It was a weakness and it was never discussed. And fortunately now we're in a very different position and more and more people are becoming aware of it. But the surveys that are out there, 80%, I also see people found one that said 90% of performing musicians in a certain survey had experienced pain or injury to the extent that it was affecting their performance or their rehearsability to rehearse. If that was any other profession in the country, we'd be shut down with health and safety. So we passionately believe that the time has come to really work in a healthy way. So Faustus, tell us what body mapping is.
Yes, body map. Anybody have any idea what it is? The body map?
How the body relates to the instrument.
Yeah, kind of. But does anybody know anything about body mapping? How about Alexander technique? Sorry. Okay. Who knows something about Alexander technique? Almost everybody. Okay, fantastic. Well, body mapping is completely informed by the Alexander technique. That's the first thing to know. And, imagine a teenager bumping into things. The reason why they bump into things is that their body hasn't caught up yet. No, their brain hasn't caught up with their body yet. The brain still thinks that they're smaller. So they still move as if they're smaller, but they, I'm suddenly bigger. So gradually, the brain catches up. So basically, in our brain, everyone has some kind of image of what their body is organized like. How is it organized? And basically, if that map is not right, our movements will be always according to that map. So, if it's good, if we really truly know the true anatomical truth about our body and how it functions, our movements will be much more fluid and free. So
anyone who's studied any Alexander probably recognises the 6 points of balance that are often talked about in Alexander. Obviously, we're incredibly limited with time today, so we're going to focus on the top 2 of those, but taking the principle of Alexander technique that obviously leading with the head and the head balance is probably the most important thing. So Alstus is going to talk a little bit about head balance.
Yeah. Okay, so the very first thing in considering any kind of proper body setup, if you like, has to be the AO joint, the atlas occipital joint, which is balance point number 1. And if you just show me, is it possible to get the room lights on a little bit? It would be great, because I can't see people thinking of that. So if you please show me where in your mind your head is balancing on the spine. Yeah, interesting to see. Some are going here, which is absolutely perfect. Most of you are here. And if you'd asked me 10 years ago, I would have done that too. Oh, someone here, yeah. You know, I'm very tense. The truth of the matter is that if you put your fingers through your ears, do you remember the brain flossing joke? Anyway, imagine a string or a stick or something going straight through your ears, and then straight through your nose and straight through. Where those sticks meet, right in the middle of your head, that is where the AO joint is. And I'd like you to here. This. Can you see it? I'm going to pass it around. Yeah. And just so you can see how incredibly far in it goes. So our skeleton, it goes in like that, the bony bits. And in fact, there's just a little hole for the spinal cord to go through. And that is, all the nerves that inform the whole body go through that little channel. And the spine is a fantastically organized thing. Look at it, it's actually quite big. If we were doing a long body mapping session, I would get you all to draw your spine into an empty body, because that shows us what our own idea about what the spine is, where it is, and what its function is. If we have the wrong idea, we will use it in the wrong way. And most of us imagine that the spine is something quite delicate at the back here. But actually, in truth, it's very sturdy. It's quite solid. And most of the weight of the body, the weight of the head, is carried through the front part of the spine. Yeah? Anyway, so as you pass that little head around, you will see that there are two little round bits in the bottom of the skull. You can see it also here. I don't know. See? You're too far away. Anyway, those two little condyles that stick out are resting in a perfect little top atlas. That is the atlas vertebrae. And you see the two little grooves. That's where the skull is balancing. Yeah. And so, how do we actually feel that in our own body? Anybody have an idea? I'll show you a way to do that. So, imagine, again, it's in here, in the middle of your head, really, truly in the middle. So, in body mapping, we're always talking about something we call palpating. We try to feel our bones. We try to really understand in a kinesthetic way. I don't know if that means anything to you. Basically, it's the sixth sense. It's the physical sense. So we really, put my hand back here and I can sense what I'm doing. That's the kinesthetic sense. So let's try to really sense it inside our head. Fingers here, maybe. And fingers here. Just try to see it. Another way you can feel it is if you curl your tongue back as far as it can go up, where the tip of your tongue is, back here. The tip of your tongue is now directly in front of the elbow joint. Weird, huh? So let's put one hand on the back of your head, take your thumb off the other hand, and put it on the upper teeth. And then we'll say yes very gently, but please do not use the muscles in your neck. Just do it manually with your finger, with your thumb. So we go like this. Does it feel weird? Does it give you a new sense of where the AO joint is? Yeah? Anyway, that's where it is. And this is how we need to say yes. It's really from all the way up here. So when we do that, we can realize, I don't need to do any muscular work with my neck muscles, really. The neck muscles are mostly there just for support. They don't really need to be on. They can be on standby instead of being on as we move our head. They can just be there gently supporting. Yeah. Then the other amazing thing is the second vertebrae. Is there a slide for that? Yeah, okay. Anyway, we'll talk about this in a minute. So before I get to that, I want to talk about the second vertebrae. You see it up there. Between the top and the second, the atlas and the axis vertebrae, there's no cushion like there is in between every other vertebrae on the body, in the spine. Yeah. So between the top two, those two here, there's no cushion. And that is because it's meant to swivel like this. So let's do another exploration. If you take your fingers and you find in your neck C7, which many of you might know what to do. It's a cervical vertebrae number 7. It's the bigger one that sticks out in some people. And put some fingers on the vertebrae that you can feel with like 3 fingers or so. And then say no gently. And you'll probably feel there's no movement in the vertebrae with your fingers on them. It's all happening above that. So when you take a fiddle, you just plonk it on your collarbone, or I don't know if you use your collarbone as a shelf for the fiddle, I certainly do. To find the right place for your head, all you need to do is gently swivel on top of your spine, say a little bit of no, then when you're in the right place, go, oh yes. And you don't need any tension in your neck. But of course the setup has to be right, just like Joanne was talking about. There has to be enough on the chin rest, so that we don't have to do anything extra to get to the fiddle. So that's a complicated process, I'm sure. There's a lot of information out there about setup, and many theories, of course. But from a body point mapping or a body aware point of view, it has to be high enough so that the head doesn't have to do anything strange with the neck. Okay. So the head, yeah. How heavy is it? Did you actually realize that it's nearly 5 kilos? 4 to 5 kilos. It's very heavy. Imagine an African person carrying a big jug of water in the head. How do you do that? Not like the guy on the left. So basically, it's like a bowling ball. If you imagine a bowling ball, pick it up, it's really heavy. So you can get 5 kilos. Imagine having that sitting on top of your own head, How would you carry it? Yeah. And basically, so if it's off balance, it becomes heavier and heavier, as is illustrated in that one. And the other thing is that if the head balance is off, it will restrict all other movements in the body. As soon as you do this, the limbs are heavier. You can experiment with this. If you like, stand up and try the good head balance and then try to move your limbs. But we might not have time to do very much of that today. And for example, if the knees are locked and the head balance isn't good, it's completely useless to get them to just free their knees. Because without the head balance being good, they'll go like this. Oh yeah, you have to bend my knees. It has to be first here, and then the knees can be free. The whole rest of the body can be free.
Thank you. So we started with showing a little bit about one aspect of balance, and obviously in the body mapping course, you go through the other 5. But what I'm going to talk a little bit about is another thing we mention a lot in body mapping, is just the awareness of the real structure of how our bodies function, how they sit, where they are, how big they are, and how actually having that knowledge can really help the very freedom that Joanne was talking about in the first presentation. So I picked for that probably one of the most important ones for string players, which is the use of the arms. And I guess the first thing to say and to ask is how many joints do we have in our arms, and where does our arm even start? I don't know if you want to just point to where you think your arm starts. Yeah, we have and the thing about body mapping is once you know, you know. So this isn't sort of to try and pick anyone out and say, no, you don't know that. It's one of those things you either know or you don't know. So this is for body mapping purposes, this is the reality for us, is that it doesn't make any sense to sort of disconnect the arm from the shoulder blade and collarbone. So we talk about a whole arm, and we've got basically including these two at the top. I will point out, I'll just move on a section, I will point out they are connected, these two, the collarbone and the shoulder blade are connected with the AC joint. But to all intents and purposes for us, when one of these two moves, the other moves with it. So we're just going to talk about this as one unit, the shoulder dome. So I guess my first question, there aren't many questions, don't worry, my first question to you is, how does the upper arm connect to the torso? And you can see here, if you palpate again like you're doing with Alistair, along your collarbone inwards towards the centre, you'll find again that knobbly bit there, and just there you'll feel that connection with the sternum, the breastbone. And I think this was one of those moments for me that I constantly go back to and find incredibly freeing, because this is actually the only place, the only joint, the only bone-on-bone connection that our arm has, our whole arm has with our torso. So often when you ask people that, people that are not sure, they think, oh, shoulder blade, what does that connect to at the back? Well, the great thing is it doesn't. There are muscles and there are things holding it together and supporting it, but this is the only actual joint. So having that visualization of the freedom of this whole long thing, just working with this very small joint here, I find very, very freeing in terms of string playing. So that takeaway is a very important one, but the other takeaway is this one, string players. Most string players' injuries stem from a mismapping that the arm actually starts from here. So, and there are all sorts of messages we'll come on to in a minute that may be why that happens. But people who are playing sort of from their arms with a sort of hesitation or a reluctance to involve their whole shoulder girdle are very likely to get injured for all sorts of reasons. So that's a very brief takeaway. We can go into that a lot more. Final question. I'm not going to ask a lot of questions. This is question number 2. What does the upper arm bone, the humerus bone, meet at the shoulder joint? Does anybody care to tell me that? Does anybody have an idea?
I don't understand the question.
What does your humerus, your upper arm bone, what does it actually meet at the shoulder joint? What part of the, anyone want to describe that in any way? Yeah, so we often see this. A lot of people say the ball and socket joint. Now, the two things. First of all, I'm going to show you this. This is the shoulder blade, and this is where that socket is. That's the socket that we do that in. It's the size of the top of your thumb. Do you want to pass that one around as well? Well, they're passing it around there, great. Again, this is an incredibly important, this is an incredibly important one for bowing, for string players. This is what makes this joint the most flexible joint in the whole body, because this little glenoid fossa, it's called, is so incredibly small. And you'll notice if I show you here, that's where it sits. So it's sitting into the shoulder blade. Your humerus joins that, which is the side of the shoulder blade. Nothing at the front, it's into your shoulder blade. And if you just see those pictures, you can get a sort of idea of where it's hanging. But what I want to show you is that thing that we can so easily clasp around it, you've got a complete space either side of it. There's a real, I don't know if you can see it from there, there's a real space here. It's not jammed up against anything. So, as I say, it's the most flexible joint in the body. And this is quite a nice way to look at it. Aristus is talking about the vertical spine, the front-bearing, weight-bearing part of the spine. The girdle literally, if you think about your shoulder blade, sits directly over that weight-bearing spine. It's not in here. And just even knowing that does help to open up the front of your torso. So, what I thought I would do is to take the 3 basic motions that this SC joint can do and show you maybe how they relate to string playing. We've had to be very selective about what we talk about. I did a picture one just so you might remember it, and maybe we can just do a couple of things. Put your index finger along your collarbone, just lay it as far along as you can, and to start with, just literally wiggle your shoulder blade. And you'll find very, very quickly, you don't have to do it much at all, and of course you can feel your collarbone moving. So if we take each of those, we do the little girl dancing, arm above the head, and just try and feel what that motion feels like. First of all with your collarbone, and the elevation of that, and then notice also what's happening with the shoulder blade at the back. See if you can really feel that.
It disappears all the way up.
Yeah, and it's basically what it's doing is, we'll see a video in a minute, it's rotating round. Then we've got the second one, which is protraction, which is the hug, and hopefully you can feel the collarbone again coming forwards there, and likewise it can go backwards. So we've got that motion both ways. And then the final one, the swimmer, is what we call a rotational motion, which is this. And the shoulder blade is actually moving quite a lot, but the collarbone, you can again feel it, is beginning to rotate a little bit as well. All of those motions with your collarbone are happening at this point. So this is a really, really vital area, and Aristus will say a bit more about that in a minute. Yeah, of course.
if we try, we always, she was saying, we say things to our students. One of them is, keep your shoulder down. And that's, most of us have said that to students. But they can misunderstand, and it can very easily be misconstrued. The good student starts to push their shoulders down. I mustn't lift my shoulders. But let's do a little exploration. Put your hand here and do the swimming action. Okay. And then try to do that with the shoulder down. Impossible, right? So there has to be a natural flow, which is the next thing that she's going to talk about.
Yeah. So probably the biggest takeaway of body mapping for me was this next one, which is something called humeroscapular rhythm, which is quite a mouthful. The humerus, the scapula, the shoulder blade. So basically, we've shown how it can move, but it's now managing the ordering of that so that things work in sync. And it's very simple. There's three basic rules. One is the scapula, the shoulder blade needs to follow in the same direction as the humerus. It needs to go soon enough, and it needs to go far enough. And the easiest way maybe to think about that is to imagine something like a train, an engine of a train in a carriage. Now obviously the carriage follows the engine, but it also needs to be ready to move. You can't have the brakes on one and not on the other. And secondly, it needs to keep going. And those second two are the two that tend to be the problem for us as string players. We either, sometimes through messaging, have got into this sort of thought process that we shouldn't be moving our shoulders at all, so it just gets stuck. Or secondly, that we sort of move it and then we think, oh, that's a bit too much, and so it just doesn't go far enough. So this which is a physiotherapy term, is a very important one for feeling that freedom of the shoulder. I've also got here a little video, which hopefully will play, which will also demonstrate, ignore the ribs please, they shouldn't be naturally moving out with the bar, but it just shows you, just notice how the humerus can begin to move before the scapula moves at all. Just at the start here, then it goes up. And the next one will show you exactly what stage, 30 degrees, is when that movement begins to happen. If you just stand up a minute actually, let's just try that, because this is a very important one. And just for people who are a bit rusty with their geometry, 90 degrees, 45 degrees, so 30 degrees is right down here. And so if you gently start elevating your arm, and just try and think, where is 30 degrees? Maybe put your hand across your collarbone again, and just think, can you begin to feel any motion at that stage? And if you can't, don't worry, that's very common. And all I was saying is, this is in a sense what body mapping is all about. By having this information, you've already begun that neural pathway to develop, which is beginning to say, yes, my shoulder blade should be beginning to float up now. And if you keep doing this every day, it's a great thing to do before you start practicing or playing or teaching. Over time, you will re-educate that. And obviously that's just the up and down, the elevation, it applies to the other motions as well. Yeah.
So imagine if you sit in a classroom, if you're in a classroom and the teacher asks a question and you know the answer, you go, yes, I know. So if you can, please, with me, shoot up your arms, both of them, as if you're saying, yes, I know, teacher. Yeah, you have a good stretch, should feel good. Yeah. Okay, imagine this is the 10th floor. Yeah. And all the way down is ground floor, but let's be on the 10th floor. All the way up. And then from here, we're going to go down to 9, 8, 7, 6, 5. Where do you play as upper string players? Or as cellists? Where is your A string? Where are you playing? Maybe somewhere between 4 and 6, right? Yeah, okay. So does that feel different than your normal playing position? Interesting. So if you hang your hands down again, yeah, and try to come up, but maybe do it as you normally do. Is that the same feeling or is it different? Yeah. So see if you can come from above. And imagine you put your fiddle here and play. It feels so much freer than if you come down from here and you don't let anything move, you just go here. Because we grew up with Barbie dolls with completely solid torsos and the arm at the side, sprouting out the side. You can pull it off, pop it back in. But in truth, you have to include the collarbone and the scapula, the shoulder blade and the collarbone, in our image of an arm. And it's important also on the left side for shifting. If you just shift with this, it's limited. Our shoulder blade sits up. You do it with you can't hear me from, but if you allow the humeroscapular rhythm to be correct on the left side, everything comes up a bit. You can do it from up here, and then as you shift, that's why you see Perman and Zuckerman and all the soloists with their fiddles very high when they're like playing high. You know, they slide down the fingerboard, not up. And in fact, the whole arm needs to follow as you shift up. The whole arm, not just from the elbow. Yeah.
So while you're standing and looking at models and thinking about how it relates to blend, if we go through, we've just talked about this elevation one. This is on the bow side. Both instruments in beautifully the same part of the bow, but violin as viola players, literally to get the bow on the string, obviously you're going above that 30%. So that sense of really engaging the freedom and just being really aware of it as it follows, it floats up to follow. Again, we can't go into detail sadly because of time, but cello, obviously it's a little more complex on the lower strings. We do get a little bit of the backward, we get the protraction and retraction on the C string, but yeah, mostly we're also talking about that same thing. This one, I love on Fournier on the left, this beautiful sense of just almost hugging his cello as he comes up, a beautiful head balance, the whole thing just totally naturally coming around. Anybody who wants to go on Steve Nisler's images page on Google will just find numerous pictures of the bow at the end of a performance somewhere in here. If you just try actually to put yourself in that position, and now do it with your, again, put your hand on your collarbone and realise it's absolutely impossible to get anywhere near there without a pretty free joint here, and shoulder following obviously. And then obviously, and so people is what Alice was mentioning, the swing. And you can actually see it, again this is a little bit more information than we've got time for, but you can see from the angle at the back of her shoulder that she's taking the whole thing round. You can see from this spine we have on the back of our shoulder blades that she's maintaining that because she's in a beautifully angled position on there. Again, that's maybe a little too detailed for right now. And finally, we have the rotation. If you could also just do this once more, because this is perhaps the hardest one to talk about to string players. Again, I'm not taking any sides on this, but I think this is a misunderstood movement. And it does need to come with a little bit of a sort of, not a warning sign, but a sense that we talk about dynamic balance a lot in body mapping, which is the sense that we can go in and out of balance, but as long as we return to this neutral. So a lot of the positions when you're at an extreme at the end of a piece or you're doing a lot of swaying around, as long as you've got this balance. And this shows it quite well. So for instance, Starker over here, he was not very tall, and it's a very natural way he was getting to the point on the A string, slightly turned, as Virginia Jensen. The picture at the top is a really good example because that actually comes out of an Alexander technique book. And it looks pretty horrific as a still photograph, right? It looks like exactly what you should avoid, this sort of tension like this. He actually was my cello teacher, so I know exactly what that is all about. He's actually showing the exact opposite, where he's saying, imagine you're playing the cello and you're on the A string and you have fortissimo and you have an accent. How are you going to prevent tension? And he's showing that very thing, that rotation, that shows you can get the extra sort of oomph as long as it comes back to neutral. So I think one other thing I've learnt by understanding how my body works a little bit more is not being afraid to go into some of these more extreme motions. Pariseau is a very good teacher for that in all sorts of ways. Not to be afraid of that as long as you come back to neutral and as long as you know what you're doing. This not getting stuck is vital. Okay, I think we should... just a couple of examples here. This was a student who I said, we were doing bowing, and I suddenly said to her, what happens if we get the rhythm wrong? What happens if the scapula leaves the humerus? And that shows you that's not a good thing to do. So she was very obliging in giving me permission to use that terrible bow technique. This is another one. Austis was mentioning shoulders down. I've had direct experience of students several times who've been, at some stage, that message has gone in, keep your shoulders down, and it's trying to play out. You can try it now. Imagine going to the point of the bow, and just try and feel what you can feel in your arm if you really don't move your collarbone. I mean, I can feel quite a lot of pain up there already. And not, I mean, you can see from where he is, the sound would also not be connected in any way. It would be a very weak sound. But the injury side, I think Alistair can maybe talk a little bit about that. We're just pulling the shoulders down, carrying heavy bags. The shoulders do that, but they mustn't get stuck.
So even the physiotherapist will sometimes tell people, keep your shoulders, put them in the pocket on your back, keep your shoulder blades in the back down, and that is just a terrible thing to say, because this makes them freeze, and it makes them stay there. Many people think that shoulder blades have to just live on the back and not move. So please take that out of your body map. They have to move. Anyway, so we were talking about the lifting and how the collarbones come up with us when the arm comes up, if we're doing it right. The cause of so many injuries, anything from tendonitis in the whole arm, tingling fingers, all these things, they can really mostly are caused by problems here in the neck and the collarbone being too low. Because we think all shoulders down, and we play here with maybe a shoulder rest that's pushing everything down, and so it's frozen. And the thing is that what you see there is the nerves that come out of your spinal cord. They have to travel in between your vertebrae. And I think it's 3 and 4 or 5. In between those is where the nerves that go into our arm travel. They come out of the spinal cord through the tiny spaces between the vertebrae, and they have to travel under the collarbone, in between the collarbone and the top rib, and then they go into our arm. There's 3 main nerves: the medial nerve, the ulnar nerve, and the radial nerve that go all the way to our hands. And if they are squashed down by the collarbone being too low, that's when we get the tingly fingers. And it can cause all sorts of problems, also with the blood flow and of course the muscles and everything around it. So it's really vital that we keep space in between every vertebrae. Imagine the cushions in between the vertebrae, but you can pump a little air into them. So if you do that, you immediately feel a little bit like, oh yeah, the head balance, back to head balance, always back to head balance, has to be here and free, so that you don't do this, that you don't squeeze anything. Many people play a little like this, or down, and so this is so important. And then this can lift up with the arm is absolutely crucial. Joanne was talking about this, what do you put under your fiddle? For me it's absolutely vital that we put the fiddle somehow on the collarbone, and that can act as a shelf for the violin, for the viola. And then if you use your arm correctly and freely, and also Vimuta there, she hasn't got any shoulder rest. It all lives on the collarbone. And then if you use your arm right, you have all this freedom. And let everything flow through. And if you don't squash it, then there's free blood flow and everything. You can avoid so many injuries up and down the arm if this is correct.
Yeah. Maybe a little bit more, well, I shouldn't say just for cellists, because of course we all sit to play as well, but this is, who's ever sat like that, or seen anybody ever sitting like that? Slouching is very, very comfortable for us as humans. And I think it helps to know why that is, and how a misuse of the muscles can actually hinder our freedom, but also, just in general, why this is happening. You've all heard of your pecs, your pectoralis major, and it's the big blue one you can see. I mean, we've got a couple of the deltoid on there as well on the right, but this one, if you notice, it's a big muscle that runs all the way down your sternum, your breastbone. It also connects all the way through, guess what, to the collarbone. So if that's being pulled down at all, that's going to be a big restrictor for your collarbone. And then the really interesting thing is, notice it attaches to the outside of your humerus. So when we burn, this muscle, this big pec, if you go to the gym, the first thing you build up is your pecs, right? This pec gets very strong, and it's responsible for a lot of our bowing action, and that's all fine. What I didn't know about it is it's what's called a tonic muscle, and a tonic muscle is like a sort of energy-saving light bulb. You can put it on, switch it on, and it can stay on all day, and it'll never run out, it'll never get tired. So this pec can very quickly pull, because of this, both pull your arm down, rotate it inwards, which already you can probably feel what's happening to your shoulder, and restrict the motion of your collarbone. And we need to constantly make sure that we're being aware of what's happening behind to balance that with our latissimus dorsi, our big back muscles, which are not tonic muscles. They need work. We need to be aware of those. I found it really helpful when I'm thinking about this also to keep thinking back to the very first point I made about the humerus fitting into the shoulder blade. So if you have a visual of your shoulder blade in your mind and the release of this, and there's one other thing that goes along with that, which is this little one on the right, which is the little brother of the pectoralis major, the pectoralis minor. Have we got a... Yes, we've got this. I don't know if you can demonstrate with that.
Yeah.
Alice will show that maybe around the room. But if you to walk your finger along the collarbone, almost to the end where it starts to go in again, and then if you come down and dig around a bit, you'll feel a little sort of knobby bit of bone, which is connected to your shoulder blade. Can you see that?
This is called the coracoid process. It comes out just before the end of your collarbone. And if you make a chicken wing, put your hand sort of under your collarbone, make a chicken wing, do a chicken wing thing, you can feel it moving under your collarbone. Do you find it?
Yeah.
Yeah?
And that's very important because this pectoralis minor attaches directly to that little bone, the coracoid process, which is part of the shoulder blade. And when that also contracts, it pulls the shoulder blade over, and that's where we get round shoulders.
Yeah, that rotates it, makes the shoulder blade stick out and a bit like this.
Yeah.
And we call it rounded shoulders.
So if we can just do one for me, one final thing before Astus takes the final point, just to get out of that, and it's a really lovely one for feeling this sort of balance we've been talking about with the shoulders, which is if you put your hand on your shoulder, and you then raise your elbow right up to the ceiling as far as you can, and just release, just have a sort of, imagine you're just releasing that pectoralis major muscle. It goes underneath your arm as well. This whole region gets very tight. And then if you raise your hand right up to the ceiling, and then just bring it round down the side. I don't know how you feel. You can just now just take a sort of little visual photograph of your two sides, and whether you feel the same both sides of your body. Normally when you look at me, if you look at me, I'm definitely not looking the same. I can feel how unbalanced I am over here, so we better do the other side as well. So hand on here, up to the ceiling, again just release it.
Ask it to chill out.
Yeah, just free it up, right up to the ceiling, and then just bring it gently back down the side. You've then hopefully got this sense, I showed that picture earlier, of the balance. Imagine that they're balanced right over the front of your weight-bearing spine, and you've got this connection of your humerus into your shoulder blades, not here, that openness we need.
We're so busy with things in front. Everyone, we always, so these are, in most musicians, this is height.
So anyway, let's talk about, can you come back to it?
Yeah, so, then we get to the arm itself. This is without the scapula, of course. So the forearm, this is a right hand. Palm up. We have these two bones in the forearm. Let's feel them kinesthetically, do some palpating. So if you find the sharp bit of your elbow, and then you can take a walk along the ulna, or the pinky bone, and you feel it all the way here to the base of the pinky. Yeah? And then the other one starts at the thumb, and that one goes in here and hides somewhere under muscles and tendons and all that stuff. Those are the two bones in our forearm. And how do they function? Does anybody know? How do you twist your arm? What's the name of our... How to twist our arm? Did anybody tell you when you started learning how to play, how to actually turn your arm to go and play?
Yeah.
Pronating, supinating, exactly. Yeah.
Don't they switch places?
Yeah, yes, exactly. So if we show the next one, the radius bone, the thumb bone, is meant to cross over the ulna. Can you see? And there's a big misunderstanding with some people are lucky and do this naturally anyway. I wasn't so lucky. When I started learning how to play, nobody explained to me that I have to turn at the elbow actually, not the wrist. So what happened to me was that I was trying to push the pinky underneath in order to get around to my fiddle. But what happens then is that this locks. So I had to help with the whole left shoulder, collarbone, everything forward, and I have a permanent damage here because this little joint here, which I now know about, I didn't even know there was a joint there before. In my mid-40s, I just got badly injured, and that's when I got interested in this and finally found out the truth of the matter. Anyway, so now I know. It came from trying to twist my arm from the wrist instead of the elbow. I don't know how many people actually really truly understand that. Let's try it. I don't know if you most of you sitting, maybe you can cross your legs and just put. Yeah, we're running out of time. Anyway, if you just make a vice with the other hand and try to turn your hand inside this, you'll find it's very tense. Yeah. Okay. Let's now do it another way. Imagine your pinky bone is the spine of a book. And you're going to open the book with letting the spine lie still, and the thumb goes to the right and to the left. And the spine of the book is staying still. The ulna is staying still. And this is happening at the elbow. You can also do it like this. You can take your thumb and push the radius bone, and then the finger and push it back. So basically, the hand and the wrist must never be separated from the forearm. Any motion you do, if you want to try to do spiccato like this, it's terrible for your wrist. You're going to injure yourself, almost certainly. And so what happens when we do it wrong? Let's do it another way. Put our elbows together, hands together, just to demonstrate the difference of doing it right and wrong. So if we make butterflies like this, thumbs out. This is good for kids too. Butterflies. Then you're pronated the right way. And if you do it the other way, you see what happens. You get very tense and the pinkies stick out to the side. This is a big red flag. If you see anybody with pinkies out, you know, either trying to play or whatever. It's terrible thing. And we need to
Just put
stop.
our hands together for such a fantastic presentation.
Obviously, there's so much to say we haven't said it. If any of you are interested in keeping in touch, that's our emails. Please feel free. And we do run courses, and would be happy to put you on a mailing list if you're interested. Thank you for coming.
Yeah. So normally this course would take at least 5 hours.
40 minutes. Thank you.
Try to give you a taster in 40 minutes, and we believe that every teacher in the world needs to know these basic things so that we can save our students from getting it. Thank you.
I want to apologise. We have got